Salve Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, estes nostra salve.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. At that time Jesus answered, I give praise to you, Father, Lord of heavens and earth, for although you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned, you have revealed them to the childlike. Yes, Father, such has been your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son wishes to reveal him. Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart, and you will find rest for yourselves. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. The Gospel of the Lord.
If you would ask St. Francis St. Francis's parents about him, they would tell you he was a rascal and a rebellious teenager. How do you guys like that? And look what happened to him. He had really no care for the family business, and he was distracted by, of course, he loved his father's successful business because it financed his active social life. Had romantic visions of going to war, which he would become a soldier, and also spent time as a prisoner of war, tortured and held captive. In all his pursuits, he kept finding diversions, and eventually God would find his way into Francis's heart. And so there's hope. But at the same time, Francis was attentive to something deep inside of him that was calling him. I think that as I look at him, that fleeing from the family business, that active social life, that going to war, it was all that restlessness that was running away from the place that the Father had in his heart for St. Francis. And so it might be something for us to consider today in that restlessness. What are you running from? What are you fleeing that the Lord is calling you to? St. Francis would eventually bump into a leper, which he detested. He had a loathing for lepers. And somehow he was compelled to kiss the leper as a way of defying his loathing for this state of life. And as he walked away, he realized that he had kissed Jesus. He saw Jesus in the most lowly. He saw Jesus in the one who was marginalized and rejected by everyone around. St. Francis would eventually hear a calling to rebuild the church. And in a sense, it's no different from the call each one of us should have as a Catholic to rebuild the church. He wasn't called to rebuild a structure, which he thought he was being called to at first, but he was called to a renewal and rebuild a church that seemed to be diminishing in life from the times. Does it sound familiar? Perhaps there's some among us, maybe even people in the School of Holy Family Academy, who are already receiving the itch, the call to rebuild a church that is going through troubled times right now. And St. Francis responds to this call. In a sense, St. Francis brought to life the calling of the end of the Mass. The Mass is rooted in a word and a Latin phrase, misere, sent. Misere est is the Latin conclusion to the Mass. In other words, be sent. That's how the Mass ends. And we will loosely translate it, go in peace, or the Mass is ended, go in peace. We translate it like that, but be sent. And are we not all called as Catholics to be sent and build the body of Christ? St. Francis had a great devotion to the cross and to the passion of the Lord. It's no coincidence that he died on Good Friday as the passion was being read. And in a sense, at his point of death, with the passion being read, he actualized what is the calling for each one of us, to die in the arms of the Father, which in a sense Jesus did, and be held by him. And the words that come to fruition from the gospel, come to me all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. This is the promise for those who courageously work in the vineyard of Christ, rebuilding the church side by side with Francis.
Regina Celi, laetare